there'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 4th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Good morning. Schools in lockdown. Hundreds of schools still have no idea if their buildings are safe as pupils return to class this week, forcing kids into more working from home. And there's no end in sight. We'll bring you the latest.
And small boat surge. Another record day of channel crossings took place on Saturday. Almost 900 migrants on 15 dinghies in one day.
Wind farm U-turn. Rishi Sunak is set to overturn the ban on building new onshore wind farms, but only where there is public support.
And we're going to unveil a little exclusive about Princess Diana because Mohamed Al-Fayed, who owned Harrods, died last week, and one of his former advisors, Piers Pottinger, a great friend of our programme, is going to tell us something very interesting about Mohamed and Princess Diana.
We want to hear from you as well this morning, particularly if you are going to be affected by kids not being able to go to school. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. We would really, really love to hear from you because it is an absolute nightmare. We're all meant to have that back-to-school feeling, and some of them, many of you, in fact, will not have kids going back to school. Let us know what's going on for you, won't you? First, though, here's the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Ministers are under pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from a certain type of concrete as children return to school. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government will spend what's needed, but the money will come from the education budget. Over 100 schools have already had to close or partially close. The government says students who can't go to school in person should learn remotely for a short time, but they haven't said exactly when things will get back to normal. Teachers say more children are likely to arrive at school this term with unclean clothes and unbrushed teeth. Nearly 3 in 4 of school staff say there's been an increase in hygiene poverty. A poll of 500 school staff in the UK also found that dirty uniforms and PE kits were the most cited indicators of hygiene poverty. 3 new MPs are expected to be sworn into the House of Commons as Parliament returns after summer recess. Keir Mathers, Steve Tuckwell and Sarah Dyke will take their seats on the green benches. It's after winning contest triggered by the departure of 3 Conservative MPs, including former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is reportedly set to reshuffle his shadow cabinet as the former civil servant Sue Gray starts her new role as Labour's Leader Chief of Staff. Drivers were hit by one of the biggest monthly fuel prices in more than 2 decades in August. That's according to the RAAC, which says the 7 pence per litre spike was the 5th largest monthly increase in 23 years. The company says rising pump prices have been caused by an increase in the cost of oil. And Ryanair says 63,000 passengers have been impacted by the air traffic control failure. More than a quarter of all flights to and from UK airports were cancelled last week after an issue with processing flight plans automatically. Ryanair says more than 350 of its flights were cancelled because of it. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning.
Good morning to you both. Well, good morning to you both. Good morning to everybody.
I think it's more than 2.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot more
Hopefully it's more than 2 of you watching.
Yeah, and listening. The Chancellor says, that's Jeremy Hunt, says there's going to be no extra cash for schools affected by the concrete crisis, with repair costs coming from existing education budget, and they could run to hundreds of millions of pounds.
Honestly, Jeremy Hunt's comments come as ministers demand that the full list of buildings affected be released.
Government says students who can't go to school in person should learn remotely for a short time. Sound familiar?
I've got no words for this today, Andrew Pearce. I'm so angry about this. I can't even tell you what it's like as a parent. A lot of you out there probably don't even know yet if it's your school. Do you know? Please let us know. If it is you and you're affected, we'll get you on the telly.
Yeah.
Come on, you can tell us how angry you are. How are you going to cope?
We know 104 have been identified in England. Some have closed completely, others have had to close partially. In Wales, they're just about to start the survey. Wales is, of course, Labour-controlled. Problems in Scotland. We've got the political commentator Piers Pottinger with us. Piers, what a mess for the government as kids go back to school. Something in the intro that Rishi Sunak could do without, and it's not as if they didn't know this was coming.
No, it's a shambles, and another shambles from the Department of Education. Incredibly, since 2010, there have been 10 education secretaries.
Amazing figure.
None of whom have achieved anything, as far as I can see. It's
Great
been a
pub
disaster.
quiz question to see if we could name 6 of them, frankly.
Well,
you'd struggle.
You would.
I would.
One of them included Liz Truss, who many people in the Department of Education have said to me was the worst.
How interesting.
Most people think of Gavin Williamson as the worst, but they've all been pretty dreadful.
Yeah.
Michael Gove, I think, did the longest stretch of any of them, but they've achieved nothing. This is a shambles, and actually it's of the government's own making, because the first announcement was dreadful and just produced immediate scaremongering from everyone. However, it's not just the Conservatives that need to be attacked here, because the schools themselves are governed, many of them, by local authorities initially. And many of those are Labour-controlled, or even worse, Lib Dem-controlled, if you can control anything as a Lib Dem. But the schools themselves have governors. They have visits from the Health and Safety Executive.
What do they do, by the way?
Well, I mean, why weren't the governors, why weren't the local authorities doing something about this if they were so concerned and knew about it? Most of the schools we're talking about 1% of the total number of state schools, but there may be many more buildings in different areas. And of course, it's not just the RAAC, it's the asbestos as well, that when they're trying to repair this, it can shift the asbestos, which can be lethal for people, and it will make some of the repairs very, very complicated. But the blame culture we have, it's easy just to go straight to the government and blame them entirely for this. That is not true. Even the NEU, the National Education Union, has a role to play, and they are always consulted over almost any issue in state schools. And one wonders why they weren't doing something about it themselves as well.
I guess from what Bev's saying as a parent, they won't care who's to blame, Piers. They'll just think, this mess has come again. We've got to teach
I mean, the government will take,
again.
in the end, the blame.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, and it's fine for Bridget Phillipson to rant and rave about this, as it was inevitable she would. But there are an awful lot of Labour politicians in the past and in local authorities who have a share of this blame. And so if I was her, I'd be a little bit careful about it.
When I heard this story breaking over the weekend or just before Piers, I thought these are going to be all Labour constituencies. I thought someone's playing politics with children's lives here. That's what this is going to be. But it doesn't look that way, does it? I think it is split across all.
I think it is. It is. That's what I'm saying. Is I don't think this really is a political problem. It's a problem of government and infrastructure in this country, which is a worrying thing.
It really is. And
there was a report going back all the way to 2007, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, of course, from a body called the Standing Committee on Structural Awareness, which recommended in 2007 that this concrete had a maximum 30-year shelf life, and was saying then that buildings should be stripped of it. 2007, and here we are, 18 years later. Nothing's happened. What a scandal. Piers.
Well, it is a scandal, and I mean it's a kind of third world scandal. You're used to seeing in third world countries buildings collapse and being poorly constructed, and you'd also think with schools you're going to invest and think about the safety of the children, as well as hospitals with patients. I mean, the people in hospitals today, it's not just school children, will be lying in their beds thinking, I hope the ceiling doesn't fall down.
Did you see that story about the hospital that will not allow obese patients on a certain floor, particularly if they're 19 stone or more, because the flipping floor could go through? That is appalling. And they haven't named the hospital.
I mean, it is. I think this is going to be a problem that is obviously going to grow and grow, and I fear it's going to get worse and worse, and the government inevitably will be blamed for the whole thing, even though it's not entirely down to them.
There are so many questions and not enough answers at the moment about this, it feels to me. I want Rishi Sunak to come out and make a statement about this. This is sufficiently serious that schools have been neglected for there to be an official... I mean, Gillian Keegan's been talking this morning...
She's doing a statement this afternoon, of course.
But none of it seems satisfactory. And what would we expect her to say? What could she say that might put parents' minds at ease?
I think it'll be very difficult for her because she'll be barracked. But actually, some of the stuff she's been saying this morning is a lot better than it was. The first announcement was crass, very badly handled and not thought through. And that's what's caused the scaremongering and, quite frankly, panic around the place. And it's not going to get better in the short term. We have massive infrastructure problems in this country. But don't forget, we've got 2,500 people work for the Health and Safety Executive. We have building inspectors. We have school inspectors.
What have they been doing?
Have regulators all over the place. Why on earth are all these people who the taxpayer funds to the tune of hundreds of millions, billions of pounds a year, why weren't they doing something about this as well?
I know. But I mean, it's a huge political problem because some reports that some of these schools could be closed till December.
And again, you see, I mean, lockdown did enormous damage to children's education, absolutely, and long-term damage. This is the last thing school children need, and it's about time. And I think what this has done is actually bring education to the forefront. It's not something that governments can just tolerate and put to one side. It's now a major issue, and it is the issue of the moment, which means Rishi is going to have to address this.
Other big issue, migrants. Record number on Saturday. Honestly, I wish the Prime Minister would stop saying the number cumulative total for the year is down. It's all to do with the flipping weather. Isn't it? It was a warm, mild day, so they flooded across. Am I allowed to use that word? Probably not. Flooded across the channel in their numbers, nearly 900 on Saturday. It's appalling. They've not got a grip of it.
Yet we read that everyone's on red alert for big numbers coming over when the sea is calm, and that they all come over.
They do.
I mean, it goes back to the French really quite happy to see these migrants going out of the country. And incidentally, when the French Parliament reconvenes, the first thing they're going to be talking about after their summer recess is immigration themselves. It's the single biggest issue in France at the moment, and Macron is under enormous pressure to do something about his own immigration problem, which is why he's quite happy to let as many as possible come over to us.
We've got to go to an interview with Chris Hope and the education. Before we let you go, you advised Mohamed Al-Fayed, who was the owner of Harrods for many years, who died aged 92, 93 last week. He'd had dementia for a long time. A complicated man, rather unpleasant man, I thought, when I interviewed him. You have an extraordinary story, which is never been told about him and Diana.
I advised him for a short time over what was meant to be the flotation of Harrods International.
Right.
And it was aimed particularly at American investors. Salomon Brothers were the lawyers and Salomon Brothers were the investment bank and Herbert Smith the lawyers here. And Mohamed told me that his trump card was when he was going to announce that Princess Diana would be president of Harrods International.
Extraordinary.
He said, that'll bring all the American investors in, won't it? And I said, well, yes, I think so. Not that she had a particular business brain,
no.
I don't think. I don't wish to be unfair to her. But, I mean, I said, well, that's absolutely amazing. And sadly, because there was not, Mohamed would not disclose all the information you had to in order to become a public company. The flotation never happened, and so none of it ever happened. And very soon, and of course, Dodi was with her, and the reason he was with her at that time was Mohamed was saying, "Give her anything she wants because I want her to be president of Harrods."
Story.
And he did tell me at one point that she had agreed to do this. Now, I don't know whether that is true, and I never will, obviously, but that's what he said.
Wow.
So it was certainly...
She would have been a great ambassador for the company.
She would have been, and he was right. He had a very shrewd business brain. He was a clever man, and as you say, complicated, ruthless, very ruthless, and sometimes rather... off the mark.
Makes you wonder whether she was being manipulated. Piers, thank you so much.
Always good to talk to you.
Right, well, we've been talking about this schools closures story this morning, and I've been asking you to get in touch. But earlier, our political editor, Chris Hope, spoke to the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, about this very issue.
We will publish a list. We'll publish a list this week, but we want to just make sure that every school, because not all the schools are back, we just want to go around the loop again and just check every school's had the chance to tell the parents. We have a caseworker working with each school. They have a template letter to tell parents. So everybody should know by now, but I just want to check that because it would be awful if a parent found out from GBNews, for example.
Will the number go up from 154 schools, in fact, 150 whatever schools?
156 that we have at the moment. So there were 52 critical already mitigated, 104 which were non-critical we've changed to critical because of an incident that happened just towards the end of August where a panel fell in a school. Not in this jurisdiction, but we went to see it and I decided to take a very cautious approach. So it's uber cautious. But what we are doing is we're surveying some of the other schools that we haven't yet done. 90% of them have been done and only 1% have come back with RAAC. So the numbers have been very small, but we still need to get to those. So I've increased the number of building surveyors from 3 to 8 so that we can get them very, very quickly.
Yes. 90% of 22,000 is 2,000 schools.
No, it's only 15,000 because they're the only ones that were built in the period.
So 1,500 schools ready to come back.
So it's probably less than that now, but we have a number of schools and only 1% on so far has been actually found with RAAC in the cases so far. So it's unusual. It's not like we're finding lots and lots of cases, but we're being very thorough.
Right, so she was talking to Chris Hope there, and Andrew and I think she said she's increasing the number of
building surveyors from 3 to 8, and there are 2,000 schools to be tested.
Well, let's talk to Chris Hope now, GBNews' political editor in Westminster. We did hear that correctly, didn't we, Christopher? She's increasing the number of surveyors to do a quick whip round of all these schools so parents can go to work and kids go to school from 3 people to 8 people, and she was proud of that. What?
Yes, I mean, don't add a zero, Bev, it's 3 to 8. But yeah, it doesn't seem that many, does it? But there's some sympathy, I think, with Gillian Keegan. This is a problem which has been going on for months, and the first warnings were in April last year. Then it became much more of an issue when there was a collapse, I think it was in Kent in the summer, and they've had to act very quickly. And frankly, if you've got those warnings on your desk, who else would do the same thing? I mean, there's been problems with schools and the fears about this concrete going back to Labour's days. There were 4 warnings to the Labour government, and of course then the Tories on their watch has happened, so no question they need to get on with it. The big worry there is there's 1,500 schools yet to return questionnaires. What happened was the government sent out questionnaires asking about concrete to the schools. They've got 90% back, and that's why you've got this 150 or so need remedial works. But there's a further 1,500 schools yet to reply, and that's what Gillian Keegan is trying to get them to get on with it. And I think hopefully the folks on GB News today on this may hurry up those pens filling in those forms, Andrew.
So a head fills in a form to say whether they think the concrete is crumbling.
How do they know they're not surveyors?
Well, we've only got 3 surveyors until today. Now we've got a whopping 8. But this just feels like a complete shambles, doesn't it?
Well, that's what Piers called it. I think he's right.
It's just terrible, Chris. Anyway, Christopher, thank you so much. We'll let you go and do some more digging into this.
We are going to go to Wales because, of course, the Department for Education says if the concrete is confirmed, they're going to ensure rapid action is taken. But in Wales, surveys have just started. Is that enough?
Let's find out. Andrew Davis is the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, both.
So, just broadly, how is this absolute disaster being handled, do you think, by the Conservative Party, but also, obviously, the Labour Party in Wales?
Well, looking at it from a Welsh perspective, obviously the Welsh Labour government are responsible for education here in Wales, and they just seem to have woken up to the fact that there might be a problem because we've had very little information over the weekend about how this affects Welsh schools, which is a complete gift of the Welsh Labour government, and there are many concerned parents who want some information pretty pronto. We did see an earlier example of this in the health service in Wales, where a hospital called Withybush Hospital in Pembrokeshire had to shut some wards back in the summer because they found this particular type of concrete, and the instability of the concrete was causing safety concerns. So in that instance, wards were closed. But really, the Welsh Labour government in Cardiff Bay are really behind the curve when it comes to getting on top of this.
Andrew, they're just about to start the survey of Welsh schools. I mean, we're criticising what's been happening in England because 154, over 104 are closing or partially closing, but at least they're ahead of the game in Wales. Why has the Welsh government done nothing until now?
Well, I think this is a typical example of the Welsh Labour government sitting back and hoping that the problem might go away when it just won't go away. We know that a certain number of schools were built in the period we're talking about up to the mid-90s. We know from a fact that there was a 25 to 30-year lifespan for this particular type of work. And so we knew that this was building up time and time again. Yet it does seem as if the Welsh Labour government, through successive education ministers, have chosen not to react to the problem. But obviously it's not just confined to education. There's the health service and other public buildings in Wales which are governed by the Welsh Labour government, and obviously the survey work, I'm assuming, hasn't begun on them as well. We're still in recess, so we haven't got the opportunity to question ministers at the moment, but certainly when we return next week it'll be top of the list.
Shouldn't they come back a bit sooner then if you've got schools potentially, it could be dozens, hundreds, could be affected, and yet kids are going back to school this week in Wales?
Well, very much so, because I've had various emails from parents and teachers over the weekend who have obviously been expressing concerns that there's a desert of information when it comes to the situation here in Wales. Everything is dominated by what's going on in England, but as we know from what's coming out in Scotland, they've identified the problem in Scotland as well, and proportionately there does seem to be a greater risk in Scottish schools than there does in English schools. This isn't a party political issue. This is an issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because obviously parents, teachers and pupils are very concerned by the situation they're finding themselves in. But as I said, it's not just confined to the education estate. It's also the health estate and other public buildings as well, which will be affected by it.
But Andrew, why now? Why now? It's not as though all these buildings can suddenly be crumbling in September 2023. Why? Why is this happening now?
Well, an interesting point that I heard in Gillian Keegan's interview with Chris Hope, with your political editor, was that she said what didn't happen in this jurisdiction were the words that she used. So I'm not sure whether she means it happened in Wales or Scotland, the example that she highlighted that speeded up the notice to put these schools on notice that they couldn't open this week. And that's something I'm going to try and get to the bottom of by the end of today, because I thought it was an interesting turn of phrase when she said it wasn't in this jurisdiction. So I'm not sure whether she was meaning it was her particular education responsibilities or another part of the United Kingdom, that there was this panel collapse in a school or public building that alerted them to the greater risk that they thought was going to be posed if schools reopened, which already had notices of closure against them.
OK.
I'm just going to finally, Andrew, I don't know if you're a parent, what age your kids are. Bev's a parent. I was at a party at the weekend with some mates, and they've got kids, and they said, no, we cannot bear the idea of returning to homeschooling. The look of horror etched on all these mums' faces. So let's be honest, it always falls to mum to sort it out. And if it does go back to... And Gillian Keegan said it's not like the pandemic. It feels like it to a lot of mums now, struggling at home with their kids, with a piece of paper, and no online tuition arranged yet.
Well, it is. It's a daunting prospect for many parents. I'm a parent myself, but the kids have sailed off into the sunset now and they're all grown up. But I can remember fully what it was like starting back in September, when you were actually thinking, we've just had 6 weeks of holidays where we've had a really nice time, but it has been trying and fill the time and get back to work as well. Not only that, it's an exciting time for many students who are starting new schools or starting new opportunities. Coursework. And it's critical that we get this situation addressed as soon as possible. One thing I would say, situation that you did highlight about 3 inspectors versus 8 inspectors that the Secretary of State was talking about. I think in that example, from what I've heard in previous interviews, she was talking of the number of companies that have been commissioned to do the work, and obviously each company will have numerous inspectors to undertake that. So I think from what I heard in previous interviews...
Andrew, we hate to interrupt you, but we are going to have to. We're going to be late for the news if we don't. We've got lots more to come this morning. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to turn increasingly hot over this coming week with high pressure in charge, and we are tapping into air from continental Europe as well, really allowing those temperatures to rise. There is a little bit of mist and fog around first thing this morning, but that will clear off fairly readily, and then certainly by late morning, afternoon, there will be a good chunk of sunshine across the vast majority of the UK. A little breezy around the southwest, gusty along coastlines here, and still cloud lingering across the very far north of Scotland, providing certainly a different feel to the day compared to elsewhere, where temperatures will be widely in the mid to high 20s. It'll be a fairly fine end to the day as well. Some late sunny intervals before we see clear skies for the vast majority overnight. Probably a reduced chance of fog because the breeze will just be that bit stronger, and it will turn quite gusty for the Banai, Brycheiniog and also Eryri. But temperatures generally holding up around 14 to 16 degrees Celsius, so quite a mild, warm start to Tuesday morning. Essentially, we do it all again. A good amount of sunshine for the vast majority of us. A little bit of higher base cloud wanting to push its way into Western England, Wales, Northern Ireland might make the sunshine hazy at times, and the cloud still lingering for the Isle of Lewis, parts of Orkney and the Northern Highlands as well. But temperatures up by a few degrees, climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius across parts of southern England. Temperatures looking like they'll peak on Wednesday and Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. on Monday, the 4th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Beth Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Schools in lockdown. Again, hundreds of schools still have no idea if their buildings are safe as pupils return to class this week, kids working from home, and there's no end in sight.
Sunak slammed the Prime Minister is under pressure over the issue after a top former education official said he was warned about the crisis but refused to give further funding.
And wind farm U-turn, another one. Rishi Sunak will overturn the ban on building new onshore wind farms, but only when there is public support.
And we really want to hear from you if your school is affected by this, or if you're just not sure whether it's affected by this, because there's so much uncertainty at the moment. A lot of the kids go back, not necessarily today, but Tuesday, Wednesday.
Well, they think they're going back. And
Yeah.
if you're a mum, this is normally the mum, isn't it?
Often.
You're going to have to deal with the online teaching from home. How do you feel about that?
Awful. Right, gbviews at gbnews.com is the email address. Let us know. First, though, here's your very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. 1 minute past 10. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Ministers are under pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from crumbling concrete as children return to school. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt insists the government will spend what's needed, but the money will come from the education budget. Over 100 schools have already had to close or partially close. The government advises students who can't go to school in person they should learn remotely for a short time, but they haven't said exactly when things will get back to normal. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says the government had to take a cautious approach.
There were 52 critical already mitigated, 104 which were non-critical we've changed to critical because of an incident that happened just towards the end of August where a panel fell in a school. Not in this jurisdiction, but we went to see it and I decided to take a very cautious approach. So it's uber cautious. But what we are doing is we're surveying some of the other schools that we haven't yet done. 90% of them have been done and only 1% have come back with RAAC, so the numbers have been very small.
Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Thangam Debonair, says the problem is long in the making by the Conservatives.
If they want to pretend that they didn't think it was a good idea, that they thought it was a good idea to cut school maintenance, that's on them. School rebuilding, school refurbing and school maintenance are absolutely critical. Building experts are there to advise government. The government has the resources of the civil service and building experts to call on. They were warned in practical, real terms when a part of a school roof collapsed in 2018 in Kent. They've been warned by successive government reports. The National Audit Office has reported even this summer they could have come clean even this summer.
3 new MPs are expected to be sworn into the Commons as Parliament returns after summer recess. Keir Mather, Steve Tuckwell and Sarah Dyke will take their seats on the Green benches. It's after winning contest triggered by the departure of 3 Conservative MPs, including former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to reshuffle his shadow cabinet, with former civil servant Sue Gray starting her new role as Labour leader's Chief of Staff. Angela Rayner is also expected to be offered a new role. Meanwhile, Labour's promising not to raise income tax if it wins the next general election. Sir Keir says he'd avoid tax hikes across the board as he pledged to avoid increasing the burden on working people. Drivers were hit by one of the biggest monthly fuel price rises in more than 2 decades last month. That's according to the RAAC, which says the 7 pence per litre spike was the 5th largest monthly increase in 23 years. Rising pump prices are being driven by an increase in the cost of oil. Teachers say more children are likely to arrive at school this term with unclean clothes and unbrushed teeth. Nearly 3 in 4 school staff say there's been an increase in what's been called hygiene poverty. A poll of 500 school staff in the UK also found that dirty uniforms and PE kits were the most cited indicators. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has replaced his defence minister. It's the biggest shake-up of Ukraine's defence since Russia's invasion last February. In his nightly video address, Zelensky said the head of the country's privatisation fund would be replacing Alexei Reznikov. The move comes amid a crackdown on corruption in Ukraine that Zelensky has been eager to emphasise to allies at home and abroad. Ryanair says 63,000 passengers have been impacted by the air traffic control failures. More than a quarter of all flights to and from UK airports were cancelled last week after an issue with processing flight plans automatically. The National Air Traffic Services has said an unusual piece of data it received forced it to switch to manual checks. Ryanair says more than 350 of its flights were cancelled due to the glitch on the 28th and the 29th of August. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning, it's 10:05. Thanks for joining us.
Well, before the break, we spoke to the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Richard R.T. Davies, about those potential crumbling schools. He told us the Welsh Government had been ineffective.
So, in response, a Welsh Government spokesperson has said local authorities and further education institutions have not reported to us any instances of RAAC, R-A-A-C, that's the type of concrete, being present within schools or colleges. We've commissioned a survey of all state-funded schools and colleges, which will identify any structures suspected of containing RAAC.
What a staggeringly complacent statement. Oh, the schools haven't told us there's a problem. There might be. There's a lot of problems in England. There's problems in Scotland. But we just hope there might not be in Wales.
I wish we had £1 for every staggeringly complacent statement we had to read out.
Absolutely. Well, the Prime Minister's under pressure over this because a former official has accused him of ignoring the crisis.
That's right. Jonathan Slater, the top civil servant at the Department of Education this morning, told the BBC that he warned Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor about the concrete crumbling in our schools. But Mr Sunak refused to fund the necessary rebuilding programme.
Over 100 schools already had to close or partially close. Chris McGovern is the chairman of the Campaign for Early Education and joins us now. Chris, you're a former head teacher. Can you explain to us how this works? You're a head teacher of a school. Is it down to you? Is it down to the Education Authority to know whether there is potential problem with concrete in your school?
It's impossible for a head teacher to know those sorts of technical things. Look, as a head teacher, I would always make sure that repairs to the building, sometimes to the roof, were done in the school holidays. You know, it's worrying to me that we have such complacency from politicians. This is a very serious crisis. The number one priority for government, for schools, parents, teachers, is to make sure our children are safe. And there's a real problem here. And we need to know a lot about it. And we also need to know why we have this problem. And I taught for 35 years. The origins of this problem go back to the 1980s. And by the way, the Department for Education's own building is in danger, I would say, because that was renovated in the 1980s. There was a former building in Waterloo. It's now moved to Westminster. And if hopefully that won't fall down. But, you know, maybe it'd be a good thing if it did, as long as there's nobody in it, because they're making a right mess of this whole crisis. And it really is a crisis.
But, Chris, is there some responsibility in the hands of the head teachers if they've been sent these questionnaires and they've just put it on a pile of papers to deal with at some point in the future and they've gone, well, there's no cracks in the ceiling, the school's probably all right, then maybe this is now they're chasing them up and they're all going, oh, we haven't done it and we don't know and the school might fall down. Is everybody now panicking?
There's a sense of panic. Look, as a head teacher, I would always act responsibly. A head teacher should take note if they're given questionnaires about the building. They should draw attention, of course, to the local authority if there are problems. But it's impossible, really, for head teachers to do everything. They are not architects. They're not engineers. They are trying to run a school. And I think probably they needed a lot more support. What's worrying to me is that these problems were known about. We, as our campaign group, were mentioning this some time ago. There is a problem about the safety of school buildings. And there's a problem which goes back, you know, perhaps 10, 20 years.
Well,
fortunately, some children...
Because I think
some children in Victorian buildings, which, of course, are OK.
Yeah, ironically. It goes back further, because I was pointing out earlier, the Standing Committee on Structural Safety, back in 2007, Chris, identified this concrete had, at best, a shelf life of 30 years and was recommending it was removed from many public buildings, including schools. That's 16 years ago.
Absolutely, and it's irresponsible of government to try to avoid the problem. And they would always talk about money, but what I would say is, look, there has been money. We spend more money on education than almost any other country on the planet. And the majority of staff in schools are not teachers. We need to look at where the money's going. The money should have been focused, first of all, and primarily on the safety of children. I think, you know, we need to get to the root of this. Other countries, Italy is an example, have had buildings falling down, have had bridges falling down, people dying. They've gone back and they've looked at what actually happened 20, 30 years ago. Who was responsible for all of this? We need to hear from those people. Some of them are still around. But most of all, we need to ensure that children are safe. And we can't guarantee that in certain schools. So we're going to have to go back to online learning in some cases. And, you know, we know how bad that was for everybody.
What will it be like for heads at the moment, Chris? It's the 4th of September today. A lot of schools back today. A lot of them will go back Tuesday, Wednesday this week. How do you manage this as a head? How do you communicate information to the parents if it is your school that's closing? What have you got to deal with?
Well, when there's a crisis like this, you know, you've got to maintain some sort of calm, of course, but you've got to be sensible as well. Whenever there was a crisis in my school, I would always say to the staff and to the pupils, we got through the Battle of Britain, we'll get through this. You know, we have to be a little bit positive about this. But there are dangers here. And it would be, if a head teacher has concerns about the safety of the building, then, you know, they really can't have children in classrooms which are likely to fall on their head. We've had situations in primary schools where these concrete beams have actually broken and collapsed when the children weren't there, of course. So what do you do as a head teacher? You have to show leadership. We're not getting leadership from government or from ministers. They need to be open and direct and honest. They need to name the schools. They need to explain why the problem arose. But always they're trying to cover up. It's a PR exercise. The Secretary of State looks slightly panicky, I have to say. But we need to be honest. Most of all, why have we got the problem? How did it come about? What have we got to do today and tomorrow to make sure children are not in danger? And if they have to go home, they have to go home because safety comes first.
This should all be about the children, Chris, shouldn't it? They've had so much disruption to their education. How bad is it for a child who perhaps is going to be effectively locked down again? The Secretary of State said it's not the same as lockdown. It will feel like it to kids and their parents grappling to teach them at home now.
Well, the lockdown was a disaster. We as a campaign group were one of the few organisations saying we should never have locked down. If I was being very, very cynical, I would say, well, of course, we closed the schools down and we got the best ever results ever. So the best way to improve standards is to close the schools. That's the cynical point of view. And of course, it's nonsense. We're living in an Alice in Wonderland world here. And we can't be closing schools down constantly and damaging children's education. But first of all, we've got to face up to the problem. And it's incumbent on the Education Secretary to face up to the problem, tell us exactly what the problem is and what we've got to do tomorrow. And that's what you do if you're in government. You have to have some spine. You have to have some leadership. And we want to know, head teachers need to know, if they've got a problem in their school, what do? They need to be told a little, because they've got to look after these children. And what happens to a head teacher if they say, right, kids, it's not safe in this school, you're going to have to go home? And for some children, I work with children from very poor backgrounds, deprived backgrounds, the school is the one place in their entire life, the one refuge where they can go for safety. And now that's no longer safe.
Yeah.
There's a danger. So I don't want to overreact, but we've got to be sensible and honest.
Absolutely. Yep, quite right. You always are. All of those things, Chris. Former head teacher there, Chris McGovern. And it's not just about the teaching. It's about the exercise that they get. It's
socialisation.
About the food they get in the day. It's
talking to each other, encouraging each other to be sociable animals.
Totally. It's just awful. And it wouldn't, you know what, it wouldn't be happening if we hadn't been primed to think that homeschooling was OK. We wouldn't be doing this. Can you imagine, go back to the end, imagine end of 2019, the government said, right, you're not going to go to school now, hundreds of you. There would be literally riots in the street with parents going, you can't do this. But because of lockdowns, now, well, it doesn't really matter. Got Sean Bailey in the studio with us, former Conservative mayoral candidate. Sean Bailey. Do you share my frustration this morning, Sean?
I share your frustration about keeping children out of school, but I don't share your frustration on how this problem's been looked at. You've got to remember, largely, this is a maintenance problem for schools. And schools were written to in 2018 to say, could you please check if you have this type of concrete in your school? Because if it's not maintained properly, there's a risk it could fail.
So that was the Department of Education?
Yes, right into all schools, finally, because, of course, all schools, particularly governors, have a legal responsibility for the physical safety of their children, of which the building is part of that. Now, fast forward to today, the step the government took, the brave step, which has led to this poor feeling, is they've changed the guidance because there was a failure in a particular school when the children weren't in school, but the government thought if that was different and children at school would be different. So they've changed. They said, look, if there's any chance you have this in your school, please do not use that part of your building.
How could they know?
How could they know?
How could a head possibly know what kind of concrete was fitted in 1970?
For the people who run that school, that is their legal obligation. But what the government have done, they've written to them and said, if your school was built between these periods, there's a chance that your school have this concrete. If so, get a survey to let us know, because then we can give you the guidance to help you mitigate this. Because, of course, if your school does have RAAC in it, it doesn't instantly mean that you need to close. It means you instantly need to check the condition of that RAAC.
Labour, of course, are making the point, Sean, aren't they, that, well, if we'd still been in power, we had a massive school maintenance budget rebuilding programme. First thing the Tories did when they got into power in 2010 with the Lib Dems, of course, was to cancel it. Do they have a point?
It was very easy to say they had a massive budget, but, of course, we had a massive tax burden, and they utterly destroyed the public finances. So that's why those two initiatives had to go. Everybody would have loved to keep renewing buildings. And, of course, the Conservative government, with the Academies programme, many new school buildings were built. But it's very easy to point a finger now, but this has been going on since the 60s, effectively.
Yeah.
And when they had the opportunity, they didn't just target this at those buildings. They tried to look at all schools, but they did it in such a poor way, at such a great expense, it couldn't be maintained.
Tories will get the blame for this, though, won't they? I mean, Piers Pottinger was on earlier saying, hang on, it's local education authorities, school governors, health and safety executive, but at the end of the day, it's the education secretary whose head's on the block.
Look, when you run the government, the burden is always yours. I personally think one of the troubles with this country is anything happens, we look to the government. And actually, I think a lot of times, local responsibility gives you much quicker, more speedy results, better results as well. But look, the Education Secretary has a plan. Her plan will be worked out, but the real challenge for the government will be what's next. Where Chris was correct, as a head teacher, you will want guidance and you will want to know what to do. And if your school cohort needs to be changed a bit, you need to get temporary classrooms, you need to not use parts of the school, you can probably deal with that. Because unlike lockdown, you're not losing all your resource. But the real challenge is, what if your school needs significant rebuilding? Who's going to pay?
Yeah, I'm going to give you some of what our audience is saying, if you don't mind, Sean. Jean has said, let's teach the kids in hotels, or maybe the churches could open some of their properties. What's wrong with portable buildings? Like, there have to be solutions, and heads will have to be creative, won't they, at the moment, if they do have to teach in temporary accommodation. Do you think there's just a sense of like, oh, it'll be fine?
Well,
we'll
the government guidance has said if the first thing you should do is A, see if you can use that part of it, and B, then look to temporary classrooms. So I think that will happen. Some schools, quite frankly, in such poor condition. I had one governor tell me they're looking forward to using temporary classrooms because they'll be better than the main
well believe it.
which is an awful shame. But remember, there should be a very small number of schools who need this, and particularly local authority schools will be able to rally around and support each other. But ultimately, the government will need to provide strong guidance, but the real challenge will be the finance.
This might be a bit niche for you to totally understand this, but Tony has got in touch and said, don't these schools have buildings insurance, including public liability cover? Every homeowner has to have it. Every caravan has to have it, static caravan. Are the government buildings exempt from this?
I'm not sure, but I doubt it. And also, there's schools that are academies as well, which probably would have to have their own insurance because they're not owned by the government in the same way that a local authority school would be. I'd be very surprised if local authority schools didn't need to have public liability insurance and building insurance. But ultimately, when you've got the government at the backstop, often things are let slide.
Are your children's school OK?
It should be, because it's an academy, as far as I know, and we haven't been written to. But this is an important part as well. I was one of the people who said, why haven't the government released this list? But they were correct not to do that, because it's much better be communicated with by your head teacher, who can control any sense of panic, than getting a letter from central government or hearing it on the news. So actually, it's probably the right step to let schools contact parents. And what the government did was give each school a project worker to help the school mitigate that.
We've got some breaking news, Sean. Don't go anywhere. I want your reaction to it. Former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson should apologise to MPs for bullying former Chief Whip Wendy Morton after he was not allocated tickets to the late Queen's funeral, an independent expert panel has said. Is that serious?
Look, I've been in politics for a very long time. If someone bullied you in politics, you'd have to be pretty bad, because there's a lot of robust exchanges. But look, let's see, if the individuals involved feel bullied, then maybe an apology can be asked for. I've met Gavin Williamson before. He doesn't look beyond an apology to me. If it needs to happen, he might. But
he might have done it already.
Who knows?
Who knows?
But he should not be bullied into apology. They need to understand if he actually did bully somebody.
Just remind us of that story. He didn't get a ticket, did he? Ticket to the funeral. He didn't get an invitation.
He thought as a former Secretary of State he should have a ticket for the Queen's lying in state, and he didn't get one. And he rounded on the Chief Whip, who he blamed for that, Wendy Morton. This was all when Liz Truss was Prime Minister in that very short period, and he was then reported to the Standards Commissioner, and he's been done for bullying.
And he's now said he's got to say sorry.
Yeah.
Well, but mate, look, if he rounded,
and of course he lost his ministerial job for bullying allegations.
I don't know if he's a bully or not. He didn't strike me as a bully, but he probably should apologise just out of pure courtesy.
Can I get one more line on you, please, about these massive influx of immigrants across the Channel this weekend? Record numbers.
It's going to get worse, and I tell you why. In France, they're under massive pressure themselves to deal with their immigration, and one of their pressure valves releases is to send people to Britain.
They're just pushing across the Channel.
What needs to happen? This needs an international response. It's beyond the stage where France or Britain can deal with it separately. It needs international response. And what you've seen with what happened to the students in the week, where their accommodation was bought up by the government, the more and more aspects of British life, more and more communities across Britain are now starting to feel the pressure. So the political political pressure.
We
will
gave
grow.
the French £500 million to sort this out between nations,
I mean,
Sean.
I don't want to cause any trouble, but I'd ask for some of my money back.
I'd ask for it all back.
Because what I would do is then spend that money that we're already paying out to help solve the situation here. But ultimately, the Western world, the G7, the G20 need to look at why there's such migration patterns and do something to keep those economies strong where they are.
And as you say, it's going to get worse,
All right,
isn't it?
Sean Bailey, always great to see you. Right, still to come, we're going to be talking about more of that influx of small boats over the weekend. We're going to be talking to Mark White. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to turn increasingly hot over this coming week with high pressure in charge, and we are tapping into air from continental Europe as well, really allowing those temperatures to rise. There is a little bit of mist and fog around first thing this morning, but that will clear off fairly readily, and then certainly by late morning afternoon there will be a good chunk of sunshine across the vast majority of the UK. A little breezy around the southwest and gusty along coastlines here, and still cloud lingering across the very far north of Scotland, providing certainly a different feel to the day compared to elsewhere where temperatures will be widely in the mid to high 20s. It'll be a fairly fine end to the day as well. Some late sunny intervals before we see clear skies for the vast majority overnight. Probably a reduced chance of fog because the breeze will just be that bit stronger, and it will turn quite gusty for the Banai, Brycheiniog and also Eryri. But temperatures generally holding up around 14 to 16 degrees Celsius, so quite a mild, warm start to Tuesday morning. Essentially, we do it all again. A good amount of sunshine for the vast majority of us. A little bit of higher base cloud wanting to push its way into Western England, Wales, Northern Ireland might make the sunshine hazy at times, and the cloud still lingering for the Isle of Lewis, parts of Orkney and the Northern Highlands as well. But temperatures up by a few degrees, climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius across parts of southern England. Temperatures looking like they'll peak on Wednesday and Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And it's 10:26. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So an astonishing 21,000 people crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year. And on Saturday, a record 872 migrants arrived in 15 dinghies with further warm weather on the way.
Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us in the studio. Honestly, Mark, when we think the Prime Minister will tell us, well, it's not as many as last year. It's all to do with the weather, isn't it? That's the point.
Well,
if it's calm, they're over in record numbers.
It absolutely shows every time we do have an improvement in the weather. And it's not just about being a hot, sunny day. The winds need to die down. Because that's the thing. You've had the winds that have been blowing, especially northerly winds that then push against the prevailing tide and also push back against the beaches of northern France and make it very difficult for these boats to get out. And we might think flat calm, you know, because you see the sort of the channel this side or the French side just for a few hundred metres offshore. But once you get out into mid-channel, it can be very choppy. And of course, you've got the wakes from all of the different boats, large shipping container ships and tankers that plough this very busy shipping channel as well. But yeah, every time the weather improves,
here they come, and they're smiling and sticking their thumbs up and taking photographs. And I looked at a lot of the pictures at the weekend, Mark. They were all, it seemed to the man, young men in their 20s and early 30s. They're economic migrants.
Yeah, well, we know that more than 80% of those who cross are young men. There are some women and children in there as well. And look, I've been across to Calais and Dunkirk multiple times over the years, and there are definitely people on the other side of the channel who I would say would fall into the category of refugees, asylum seekers, that if they came, they would stand a good chance of having their asylum claims granted. But the vast majority of people that I've seen over the other side of the years, and you speak to them, you talk to them about where they've come from, what their aspirations are, and it's very clear that they are economic migrants. It doesn't mean they're not leaving behind, you know, desperate conditions and dysfunctional governments.
Well, they've got a few thousand in the bank, Mark, to pay for the flipping trip across the channel.
Well, there is that, yes. Often that's paid for by lots of people in a community, though, to send them out as economic migrants to come to the UK. Then they send a proportion, the most of their earnings back to their family, to their village, and that then pays for their trip over here. They are adding to the good of that particular community back home.
We were just mentioning to Sean Bailey about this £500 million that we gave France not long ago. I want to say, was that 6 months ago, I think, the latest instalment. Is that audited, Mark? Do we have any transparency on what that money is actually attributed towards?
Yes, I think the British government have a fairly accurate idea of how that's being spent. For instance, 40% more in the way of policing patrols along that 70-mile stretch of coast. Now, it's very contentious, £500 million to give to the French over 3 years. What I will say is, I think that it is having some kind of an effect. Because if I look at the situation last year, in August, OK, there was better weather, but on the very busy days, you were getting up to 1,000, 1,200 people crossing on the very busy days. Now, the very busy days, 6, 7, maybe 800 as we saw at the weekend. And the reason is there's a lot of police around Calais and Dunkirk, and that seems to be forcing the people traffickers much further south towards Boulogne. And in doing that, it's obviously more problematic for them. They've got to get all their logistics and resources into play, and I just don't think they can push off as many boats as they once did. So it's probably having an effect. I mean, we're still talking 21,000 people who crossed illegally to the UK so far this year.
21,000 too many.
Yeah.
Do you think they should be able to apply for asylum from their country of origin?
I think...
How would that work? Online, because this is one of the best ideas I've heard, is that they can apply online, they can give you their situation, they can't say my passport went in the sea, they can send you a picture. Why don't we do that?
Well, I think, I think you're right. I think actually services further up route where people, maybe it's not practical in their own country that they can do that, even if they applied for asylum, how would you get them out? Sometimes they just have to flee. But in a safe third country, a facility perhaps to get to your nearest British embassy and to then lodge some kind of asylum application. Then you can actually filter out those that you think are genuine asylum seekers and those that are not. Or even, as opposition parties and charities have called for, a post in France, in northwestern France or Paris, but somewhere where they can go and they can apply there through the French authorities to the UK government.
Yeah. All right, Mark, thank you so much. Mark White there. Right, still to come this morning. Would you welcome a wind farm near your house?
No.
Up next, find out why that could soon be a reality for some of you. Here is the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much. It's 10:32. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. We start with some breaking news. An independent review says former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson should apologise to MPs for bullying the former Chief Whip. He sent offensive text messages to Wendy Morton after he wasn't invited to the late Queen's funeral. The panel says Sir Gavin should also take part in appropriate behaviour training. And in other breaking news, a 21-year-old man has been jailed for life for the murder and sexual assault of his sister. Connor Gibson attacked and killed Amber Gibson in a South Lanarkshire woodland. In a statement, Amber's former foster family described her as the most giving, loving, supportive and admirable person. Ministers are under pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from crumbling concrete as children return to school. Jeremy Hunt insists the government will spend what's needed, but the money will come from the education budget. Over 100 schools have already had to close or partially close. The government advises students who can't go to school in person they should learn remotely for a short time, but haven't said exactly when things will get back to normal. And Sir Keir Starmer has started a reshuffle of his shadow cabinet as former civil servant Sue Gray starts her new role as the Labour leader's chief of staff. Angela Rayner's also expected to be offered a new role. Meanwhile, Labour's promising not to raise income tax if it wins the next general election. Sir Keir said he'd avoid tax hikes across the board as he pledged to avoid increasing the burden on working people. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2625 and 1.1699 euros. The price of gold is £1,539 and 54 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,516 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
This is GB News. Now, would you welcome a wind farm near your house? Up next, find out why that soon could be a reality. For more of us, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:39 with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, and they're here in the panel with us. Oh, but first we're going to listen to this. By the way, this is a corker. This is from the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan. And just remember, she's talking about the fact kids' schools may not be safe for children to be taught. Just listen to this.
This is their video.
RAAC stands for Reinforced Autoclaved Aerated Concrete, and it's a lightweight form of concrete that was used in building construction from the 1950s until the mid-1990s. Problems with the strength and durability of the material mean that some buildings may pose a threat to safety.
Risible.
So just to be clear, that's
Risible.
the official government video explaining this situation. Sarah Vine, Emma Wolf are our guests this morning. And we're all slightly aghast. Sarah, what's your response to that?
Having, by the way, put the boot in, the Secretary of State for Education, in your column yesterday. I mean, what is that meant to be?
I don't know.
Is it to get kids involved?
It's meant to be cool. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Gillian Keegan is a very nice
person.
Yeah.
But she has not covered herself in glory over the last few months. There was that whole business of her saying, "Oh, A-levels don't really matter."
That's right.
When she decided the great grade downgrade of 2023, which has caused quite a lot of hassle for people.
Quite.
And now this sort of
wearing her £10,000 watch.
Exactly.
Not a great look.
How does it work? So your ex-husband Michael Gove was Education Secretary. If somebody had come to him and said, "You've got to do a video, Michael, announcing this massive issue with
that
schools,"
would not be what he would have done.
What would he have done? Like,
he wouldn't have done that.
He'd have told the civil servants to get stuff.
He would have done.
So somebody
yes.
in the background has said, "We're going to make it cool and put some."
Yes, I have no idea who.
And she's a weak Secretary of State, so she goes along with it.
Yeah, she shouldn't be doing anything like that, to be honest. I mean, I just don't think it serves a purpose. What is it supposed to do? Go viral on the internet?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Emma, children aren't going to watch it, whatever music you put behind it, and they're not bothered. They're happy to be off school. It's the parents who need to know what's going on.
Parents are. I saw a child on the way here. I saw a child in school uniform, and it's just this is the time. Children are meant to be going back to school. Parents, we're on our knees. We're on our knees. My 3-year-old is going to start preschool allegedly in about a week, and I'm dead. Like literally. If they closed it, I think I would probably go and murder them.
Yeah.
You can't say to parents right now, well, you can now. After lockdown, I think you made the point, Bev. There's a new landscape.
Yeah.
After lockdown, you know, whether children go back to school or not, parents just going to have to cope with it.
And Gillian Keegan says, "Oh, it's not going to be like lockdown." What's the difference if you've got to start teaching your kids at home again?
You're completely right. This whole notion that you can suddenly do remote learning. I mean, remote learning is not a thing that happens.
But you can't leave the children at home remotely learning.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, parents have got lives. I mean, my children have now left school, but you know, I can remember crawling towards the end of the summer holidays, desperate for them to go back to school so I could actually change the sheets and get some stuff done.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, schools perform an important function. You know, they're not just there. They're part of society, and that's why we should never. But the thing that I don't understand about lockdown is that they've known about this since 2018.
Yeah.
So I didn't agree with the school closures, but given that we did have the school closures, wouldn't it have been incumbent on somebody to say, look, we've closed the schools, why don't we go in and sort out this
and let's sort
concrete
out
problem? Because they're closed at the moment.
Asbestos as well.
Exactly.
The whole lot.
And what is the problem?
Because construction was still allowed to continue
and
during
they could wear their lovely COVID masks to protect them from all of these things. But what is the problem in this country with building buildings out of brick properly and not just building, you know, things made out of basically
Well, I mean, that's not the government's fault. I mean, the thing is that...
But I mean, decades worth of investment.
I agree.
Why are we building things that are going to be knocked down in 20 years?
But we've also heard today, haven't we, that the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time was told by his most senior civil servant, the most senior civil servant, you've got to sort this problem out, release the money for schools, the concrete problem. Who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
It's on his watch, Sarah.
I'm afraid so. That's what's so depressing about this whole thing is that is that actually they should have done something about it. I'm a Tory, and it's really hard to see them making these sort of own goals.
And for once, Keir Starmer's little attack ad that he's come out with, he's right on this one. He says, do you think your child's school should be safe? Rishi Sunak doesn't.
Yeah. Do you know what? I got a very interesting message from my mother, who is a regular viewer of the show and is often the voice of reason and common sense. And she was the head of our high school for nearly 30 years, the governor. She wasn't the head, she was the head of the governors, and she pretty much ran the place. And she was in charge of the buildings. And she said if these letters went out in 2018 to these schools to say you need to reply with a questionnaire, they'd say, we'll deal with it. 2019 came and went. And then guess what? 2020, 2021, off the radar, schools were closed. And then everyone's trying to get back into reality. Yeah. And maybe that's what's happened is we've got to 2023 and they've now gone, oh, blimey.
I think so.
We lost 2 years there where we should have been dealing with this.
And I don't think that records necessarily exist for all this. I don't know whether people know what's in their ceilings and in their walls and in their and in their infrastructure. I think that people are just getting on with the day-to-day business of running their schools.
It's fallen down a priority list.
It's terrible. Look, I'll tell you the story that shocked me at the weekend, Sarah. It's on the front of the Mail on Sunday. Tesco workers...
Oh, yeah. Having to wear body cams.
Body cams. This is an interview with the chief executive because of the level of physical and verbal abuse. What's become of this country?
I have no idea. I mean, the idea that you would go to the supermarket and abuse a supermarket worker, why would you do that? It's insane.
Lowly paid.
I mean, I think
who were there the whole way
Tesco,
through the pandemic.
There's quite a lot of their stores are open 24 hours.
Yeah, they are.
And I suspect that a lot of that stuff happens late at night when you get people who've had a bit, you know, had a few sherbets coming in and you know, behaving badly. I mean, I don't think you get it at 10 o'clock in the morning with me going to get my
It can't be the solution, though, surely, Emma. Surely, there should be decent security guards in supermarkets if they need them. I don't want to live in a world where everyone I'm talking to has a camera that's filming me.
That's filming me, exactly. But, A, what's the point of filming them? Because the police are not going to follow up. The police don't follow up low-level crime that they, whatever they call it.
Oh, but being assaulted by somebody in a supermarket is not a low-level crime,
Or being abused, physically and verbally abused, as a test of us.
Be a low-level
Of course they should be following it up, but the police are not following things up like this. The other thing is, when you get rid of almost all the staff, I mean, my local Tesco,
Good point.
if you go in late at night or early in the morning, you've got maybe one lady on the till.
Right? And all those wretched
self-serve. So, of course, there are going to be people who come in drunk, who decide to shoplift, maybe get challenged, and then they start shouting or hitting people or running around and grabbing stuff. And I don't think they care about being...
I mean, it's an excuse to catch shoplifters, this.
Well, I mean, they've got CCTV cameras. I mean, they've got plenty of cameras in the supermarkets to catch shoplifters. It's just that, obviously, you have to have someone looking at them, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is more for personal protection.
And isn't it awful that we live in a world now where people don't just behave appropriately?
Well, people just don't. They behave really badly. It's extraordinary. I mean, you notice it more and more just on the streets. Just, I live in Chiswick, and I was crossing the road the other day, and there was a woman who just pulled her pants down and relieved herself in the middle of the road. And it was extraordinary.
Really?
Oh, like a young person?
I think she was in her 30s.
Did you say anything?
No, none of us did. That was the extraordinary thing. We all sort of looked at her and sort of shuffled
because
off.
You'd be frightened you might get a punch in the head.
Well, it's just that there is a level of... I don't know, societal breakdown? I don't know.
Are we all too frightened to intervene and say, actually, that's wrong, guys on the bus, or the young lads on the bus?
Because we're in a knife culture and a gun culture.
Because we're in a knife culture, but also we're told, don't put your health and safety at risk, all of that. There's a gang of lads who go up and down our street, and that's Islington, perfectly nice area, and the police, everybody knows about it, everybody knows who they are, everybody knows who this gang are, and probably where they're taking the phones, and the police won't intervene. Why? Why won't they intervene? Why don't they just grab the lads by the thing?
And yet we keep reading that the Home Secretary has finally got it into the skulls of the chief constables that they must investigate everything now if there's a lead, and there's a positive lead. There would be a lead with your gang, Emma, because, as you say, the locals know who the gang is.
We could literally take them to where they go, to this council estate with all the phones, but the police don't want to intervene because maybe there aren't enough of them. They don't want to get involved.
Social cohesion.
Health and safety.
But also the thing is most locals do know who the miscreants are. They do know who the troublemakers are. They know who the drug dealers are. They know who the... If the police just bothered to ask...
Well, if there was a copper on the beat as well, it would help, Sarah. When did you last see one?
When my son was robbed at knife point, and they came round to the house in my local leafy area, and two people robbed him at knife point. I mean, there's a lot.
Did they ever get them?
I don't know. But because there's a lot of what's it called, data protection.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Well,
know.
I saw 8 of them at the weekend. It was a very nice middle-class festival, also in Chiswick, a music festival, and these
were you at pub in the park?
Walked in, and I said, "Oh look, the strippers have arrived," which they thought was quite funny. But then I did think, can't you go and solve some crime in this area? This is the safest festival in the country.
Instead of dancing around with their rainbow flags
Honestly, right, Sue Gray, Sarah. Now, when you hear, like, Labour reshuffle, everybody's not interested. It's not terribly interesting, is it? But it does have this slightly...
It has this little
busy dynamic.
It has this little saliency, because, of course, Sue Gray, until very recently, was, queen of Whitehall, wasn't she? I mean, she knows everything about everyone, and she was a civil servant for many, many years, knows where everybody's bodies are buried.
And propriety,
all about compliance and
ethics.
Propriety, and she, of course, was overseeing the Partygate inquiry, which found Boris guilty, which did for Boris. And lo and behold, here she pops up working for Keir Starmer. I mean, I don't know. I'm just putting those things out there, and you can draw your own conclusions.
Well, Boris's supporters would have said, and they did say, Emma, that it negated the entire Partygate inquiry because she was all over it like a rat.
This was so corrupt. We never really had the truth. When did she and Sir Keir first go for lunch? When did they start discussing this? Was it back, I can't remember the dates now, was it the October, was it November? Or did she wait her 3 months until they were able to... I don't think we ever got the truth about that, really.
No.
And I think it's now clear that she was not politically neutral, and she should have been above that.
But no civil servant is politically neutral. I mean, I know they're supposed to be, but what she is it sort of exemplifies.
Yeah, but if you're head of ethics and
propriety of the civil service.
But if you're head of ethics and propriety, you have to be.
Yeah, of course.
Also, she was in charge of that very, very politically sensitive report. She wasn't just another civil servant.
Yeah.
you know, it's a little bit more than just, you know, yeah, well, they all have their, you know, they all have their
the
leaders.
moment her report came out, Boris was finished.
Will she be an
was over.
asset to the Labour
Well,
Party?
the thing is, you know, I think it was Gus O'Donnell, known himself as God, who was the former head of the civil service, who said that she is the one woman who should really write a book about politics because the things she knows are the most interesting, but that, you know, those secrets will go to the grave with her. And the question is, will they? Or is she just sitting in Keir Starmer's office going, oh, well, the thing about him is that, and the thing about her is that.
Everything.
But exactly, I don't believe that anymore. I don't, you know, I just simply don't believe that she won't tell all.
She'd have known all about their long-term planning, and she knows all their foibles and their weaknesses. She knows everything.
Yeah, she does.
She's a walking Bible.
But is that not typical in politics, though, in terms of people jumping around and doing different jobs? There feels something quite unprecedented.
I mean, nothing happened without Sue Gray's say-so.
Yeah.
I mean, she wasn't just powerful, she was all-powerful.
At every reshuffle, the cabinet minister greets the prime minister, they're told about the job, and then they have to see Sue Gray. She's waiting in the ante-room, and she tells them a few things they can and can't do. Every single reshuffle that's gone on for years. Enormous power. You cross Sue Gray, you're in big trouble.
Why did she therefore decide to go and work with Keir Starmer? What's the appeal for her?
Because she hates the Tories.
She's a
She got rid of Boris, and now she's going to get Keir Starmer into power. That's my view.
But I mean, I do think it's that. I mean, I just do think it's kind of outrageous when you think about it. It really is.
And they got away with it.
I'm also amazed that this reshuffle is actually finally going to happen. We've heard about this reshuffle for months and months. What, Starmer's going to do something.
He's got a deputy who he can't stand.
I know. I'm so excited to see what happens to Angela Rayner.
Runs to 24 words, but she will remain as deputy leader because that's an elected post. But he doesn't talk to her, he doesn't consult her, so it's interesting what he does with her.
I know. That's what I'm waiting for.
Shall we talk very quickly about poor hygiene, Emma? You have excellent hygiene.
I really do hear it.
And the number of children that are going to go to school with dirty clothes, hands, face, hair. What's going on?
I mean, we know lots about good nutrition and how important that is and how poorer families, you know, struggle to get their kids well fed so they can actually learn. But this is really, really sad. But teachers have been talking about children coming to school, up to 70% of children coming to school with dirty clothes, they haven't had a bath, they haven't brushed their teeth, all of that. When you're a child, and also things like hygiene poverty, and we could talk specifically about for girls, you know, period poverty and that kind of thing, where they actually can't afford hygiene products. And when you're a child, this kind of thing, you know, it's very important, and it's very embarrassing when you come from a home like that. And I think
soap and water is not expensive.
But exactly what my mum used to say, soap and water costs nothing.
That's not fair. That's not fair when families are struggling to heat their homes and wash their children.
Well, I think it's more about culture, isn't it?
You cannot put a child in a cold bath in winter. No, I'm sorry. I've worked with charities where they are the parents are absolutely devastated that they can't give their children hot baths. Cold water and soap.
Well, I think it reminds you of the days when, you know, kids, sort of 30s and 40s, when children would turn up to school with no shoes and whatever. I mean, to think that that's what's happening nowadays.
We've got rickets and children.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of cleaning your teeth, though, I think you know, I think there's two things happening. There's poverty, but there's also a sort of general lack of parenting going on, which I think, you know...
And lack of competent parents.
Yeah.
Kids who don't want to do anything.
Yeah, I don't want to brush my teeth, I don't want to have a bath.
We've got to bring some breaking news. Emma, we've got the answer to Angela Rayner. The reshuffle's underway. Angela Rayner, breaking news, Angela Rayner, who's the deputy who's been given a big... She's now shadow deputy prime minister and shadowing levelling up secretary, which means Lisa Nandy, who was shadow levelling up secretary, who ran for the leadership against Keir Starmer, who he also doesn't like, hasn't got that job.
He doesn't like either of them.
What do you think about that?
Well, levelling up is one of those.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is set to turn increasingly hot over this coming week with high pressure in charge, and we are tapping into air from continental Europe as well, really allowing those temperatures to rise. There is a little bit of mist and fog around first thing this morning, but that will clear off fairly readily, and then certainly by late morning afternoon there will be a good chunk of sunshine across the vast majority of the UK. A little breezy around the southwest and gusty along coastlines here, and still cloud lingering across the very far north of Scotland, providing certainly a different feel to the day compared to elsewhere, where temperatures will be widely in the mid to high 20s. It'll be a fairly fine end to the day as well. Some late sunny intervals before we see clear skies for the vast majority overnight. Probably a reduced chance of fog because the breeze will just be that bit stronger, and it will turn quite gusty for the Banai, Brickay, Niog and also Eryri. But temperatures generally holding up around 14 to 16 degrees Celsius, so quite a mild, warm start to Tuesday morning. Essentially, we do it all again. A good amount of sunshine for the vast majority of us. A little bit of higher base cloud wanting to push its way into Western England, Wales, Northern Ireland might make the sunshine hazy at times, and the cloud still lingering for the Isle of Lewis, parts of Orkney and the Northern Highlands as well. But temperatures up by a few degrees, climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius across parts of southern England. Temperatures looking like they'll peak on Wednesday and Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 4th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Schools in lockdown. Hundreds of schools still have no idea if their buildings are safe as pupils return to class this week, forcing kids into working from home. And there is no end in sight.
Sunak's slam, the Prime Minister under pressure over the issue after a former top education official said he warned him about the crisis, but he refused to provide the funding required when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Promotion for Angela Rayner. The Labour's shadow cabinet reshuffle is underway, with the party's deputy leader getting an enhanced role as shadow levelling up secretary.
It's an enhanced role, but she's lost a lot of roles too, because in the last reshuffle, which was botched, she had tied her into 24 words. But it confirms now what we've always suspected: if Labour win the election, which I think they will, she'll be Deputy Prime Minister. There's a thought.
If there's one phrase that just winds me up, it's levelling up. It's the most stupid political phrase, and there's some stiff competition for that particular title. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. But first of all, here's Tatiana Sanchez with your latest news.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Angela Rayner has been appointed Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary. She takes over from Lisa Nandy. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer's reshuffling his cabinet. Former civil servant Sue Gray starts her new role today as the Labour leader's Chief of Staff. Meanwhile, Labour's promising not to raise income tax if it wins the next election. Sir Keir says he'd avoid tax hikes across the board as he pledged to avoid increasing the burden on working people. An independent review says former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson should apologise to MPs for bullying the former Chief Whip. He sent offensive text messages to Wendy Morton after he wasn't invited to the late Queen's funeral. The panel says Sir Gavin should also take part in appropriate behaviour training. Ministers are under pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from crumbling concrete as children return to school. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt insists the government will spend what's needed, but the money will come from the education budget. Over 100 schools have already had to close or partially close. The government advises students who can't go to school in person to learn remotely for a short time, but they haven't said exactly when things will get back to normal. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says the government wants to be careful.
There were 52 critical already mitigated, 104 which were non-critical we've changed to critical because of an incident that happened just towards the end of August where a panel fell in a school. Not in this jurisdiction, but we went to see it and I decided to take a very cautious approach. So it's uber cautious. But what we are doing is we're surveying some of the other schools that we haven't yet done. 90% of them have been done and only 1% have come back with RAAC, so the numbers have been very small.
Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Thangam Debonair, says the problem is long in the making by the Conservatives.
If they want to pretend that they didn't think it was a good idea, that they thought it was a good idea to cut school maintenance, that's on them. School rebuilding, school refurbing and school maintenance are absolutely critical. Building experts are there to advise government. The government has the resources of the civil service and building experts to call on. They were warned in practical, real terms when a part of a school roof collapsed in 2018 in Kent. They've been warned by successive government reports. The National Audit Office has reported even this summer they could have come clean even this summer.
A 42-year-old man who murdered a 6-year-old boy nearly 30 years ago has lost an appeal against his conviction. James Watson was given a minimum jail term of 15 years last year for killing Ricky Neve. The boy was found in the woods near his home in Peterborough in 1994. A 21-year-old man has been jailed for life for the murder and sexual assault of his sister. Connor Gibson attacked and killed Amber in a South Lanarkshire woodland in 2021. In a statement, Amber's former foster family described her as the most giving, loving, supportive and admirable person. Drivers were hit by one of the biggest monthly fuel price rises in more than 2 decades last month. That's according to the RAAC, which says the 7 pence per litre spike was the 5th largest monthly increase in 23 years. Rising pump prices are being driven by an increase in the cost of oil. Teachers say more children are likely to arrive at school this term with unclean clothes and unbrushed teeth. Nearly 3 in 4 school staff say there's been an increase in what's been called hygiene poverty. A poll of 500 school staff in the UK also found that dirty uniforms and PE kits were the most cited indicators. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has replaced his defence minister. It's the biggest shake-up of Ukraine's defence since Russia's invasion last February. In his nightly video address, Zelensky said the head of the country's privatisation fund would be replacing Alexei Reznikov. The move comes amid a crackdown on corruption in Ukraine that Zelensky has been eager to emphasise to allies at home and abroad. Ryanair says 63,000 passengers have been impacted by the air traffic control failures. More than a quarter of all flights to and from UK airports were cancelled last week after an issue with processing flight plans automatically. The National Air Traffic Services has said an unusual piece of data it received forced it to switch to manual checks. Ryanair says more than 350 of its flights were cancelled due to the glitch on the 28th and the 29th of August. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning, it's 11:06. The Prime Minister is under real pressure this morning after crumbling schools were revealed. A former official accused him of ignoring the crisis.
We're going to cross live to our GB News national reporter Theo Shikomba, who's in Essex at a closed-down school. Theo, morning.
Yes, well, a very good morning to you. It's been a lot for school teachers, head teachers and those who work with schools in the last couple of days. Many of them asking, is this the right time? They found out on Thursday at this school here and they've had to quickly make plans. So we understand that this reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete is affecting this school. 22 rooms now out of action. Normally students would go home with their iPads, but of course they weren't expecting this situation. So they're now having to alter their plans, and we could see the school children go back to those plans which were in place during COVID, where remote learning was taking place. But they are trying to quickly establish alternative plans, so some temporary building so that students can still come in into this school. And we've had the opportunity to go inside and see where this issue is taking place, and we spoke to the head teacher, James Saunders, and this is what he had to say. So which part of the school are we in at the moment, and what classrooms are currently out of action?
Right now we're on the second floor of the main block. This is the maths corridor. It's the main corridor of the school. It goes into English and then makes a right and goes into humanities. So we've got all of our maths rooms along here.
So this is essentially one of the main parts of the schools undoubtedly out of action. When did you find out about the specific rooms then?
The specific rooms, we knew which rooms had different varying levels of RAAC just prior to the summer. That's when we received our report. That report outlined what rooms were critical, high, medium and low risk. We had no rooms rated critical, so at that point the advice was to not do anything other than wait for DFE to come in and do a more detailed survey and then help develop an action plan to sort that out in the future. That then changed just prior to us coming back. Any room that had RAAC identified had to be out of action.
Now, this RAAC is not exactly obvious, so is it just a case of, we have to take all measures to ensure that staff and students are safe?
I think that's probably how we have to proceed with things. I mean, our rooms, they look fine, they look normal. A lot of them have been decorated over the summer, ready for the start of term, and now they're sitting empty. You can't really see any obvious signs unless you really delve to find where the RAAC is above the ceiling tiles.
We've heard from a former senior civil servant, Jonathan Slater, who said the government halved the budget for school repairs in 2021. And he said the government also agreed to fund work on 100 schools a year to fix crumbling concrete and other problems at school. We've heard similar issues like this in other areas, such as hospitals and other public sector buildings. But now this one affecting schools, it's all about the timing, just as school term is just about to begin. Many parents, as we've heard over the last few days, one parent, for example, saying, I've got a 6-year-old, what am I supposed to do for the next few days when they are ultimately due to return back to school and the parent back to work? And of course, teachers had prepared lessons which need children to be here in person. But for example, here, the maths classes, 4 out of 5 of them are no longer in action, and various other parts of the school. On my right, though, is the oldest part of the school, built in the 70s. And of course, we know that this RAAC was popular between the 1950s and 1990s. But this is something they are having to deal with at the moment, at ensuring that children can still get the education that they need when they're due to return in the next couple of days.
OK, thank you so much. GBNews' national reporter Theo Chicomba there in Essex. We are now joined by the education commentator, Lord Lucas. Good morning. Good morning. Now, you're also the editor of the Good Schools Guide, I believe. So yes. How difficult is this going to be now at the moment for schools? And where do you personally lay the blame?
Well, for the schools affected, it's going to be enormously disruptive. But if the DfE are as efficient as they say they're going to be, it shouldn't last too long. They've been hauling in mobile classrooms. They've been hauling in other forms of shelter. So they expect schools to be, most of the schools affected, to be able to get back to working normally in a fashion in a week or two. I think it was entirely a sensible decision by them to say, well, the advice we'd had before isn't up to scratch. We're really worried about the safety of our children. We've got to act now. Where's the long term for this? I think that's something we really need to look at and understand. I mean, there's a lot of politicking going on at the moment. But as a nation, we need to get better at building really good, long-term, resilient and flexible buildings, and not accepting something cheaper and quicker as an alternative. And that's a decision we've got wrong ever since the war, and really need to examine why we have continued doing that.
Are you arguing, Lord Lucas, that there's no need for any children actually at the moment to be taught from home, to go back to the horrors of home tuition, because they can use porter cabins, they can find temporary structures? Some speculation in the papers today, why not use churches and other community buildings to prevent kids being taught from home?
I think that's all very good ideas. Everything will depend on exactly what's happening around individual schools. There will be some which have to go back, as you say, to all the difficulties of COVID home education. But I really hope that's very few. For most schools, there are other spaces available or that will become available. And the more we can do and the quicker we can do on that, the better.
It feels like a bit of a metaphor in some ways, doesn't it, these crumbling schools for me? The significance of it. It just sort of indicates, I think, that we've neglected education in this country, not only just the buildings, but also just the sports facilities to kids, the decent catering facilities. You know, do you have a sense that this has brought into focus the neglect that we're guilty of with our education system?
I hope it has. I think we need to focus on educating kids in good buildings. Education can take place in a tent. I mean, there's no need for good buildings, but good buildings help a lot. So getting us back to a proper program of refurbishment and rebuilding, that's good. Not to imitate the Blair years building schools for the future, which was just a paradise for architectural no-hopers, but to do something that's really thoughtful, considered, consistent, that would be a good idea.
OK, thank you so much. Lord Lucas there, education commentator and editor of the Good Schools Guide.
Very excellent publication.
Excellent publication. And you know what? You wait for one Lord and then two come along at once, Andrew Pearce.
I know.
Yeah, Lord Bethel is with us now, James Bethel. Do you just want to broadly tell us your feelings on this? It was interesting then hearing Rafe there say about the fact that there is some politicking going on today. Is there? Or is it this is just purely a Conservative problem, surely?
No, it's a long standing. I thought Lord Lucas put it so well, because I remember building schools for the future. It was a blank cheque for no hope, as he put it. And there is a concern that the civil servants sometimes are risk adverse, that they sometimes over-engineer things and they have panic attacks about false fears. On the other hand, I think you're right. There are large parts of our infrastructure that we have completely left behind. I don't understand why we haven't been steadily building schools with proper catering facilities and sports facilities. And in my own area of health, we face a similar problem. There's a big hospital building programme going on at the moment. They're looking at very cheap modular hospitals. That phrase fills me with anxiety.
What does it mean, modular?
Cheap.
Right.
It means doing it in an ugly, mass-produced kind of way, which has some merit. I mean, there isn't an endless amount of money. We have to be thoughtful about the way we do things. But we should be putting technology at the heart of the way in which we build things. And we should make things user, patient-friendly, school, pupil-friendly. And I fear that things are being done in an uncreative, thoughtless way.
When you say you should be putting technology at the centre of things, what do you mean?
Well, there's been a tendency, I think, recently to focus on the concrete and the sort of physicality.
Clearly not, because the buildings are all falling down.
Actually, the way in which you would do a modern school or a modern hospital would be to have the screens, the fibre, the way in which patients and pupils and even sports people interacting with technology can massively enhance.
Technology breaks down. Technology breaks down. We just want good buildings which are going to be sustained for decades.
I understand that sentiment, but actually, in the modern world, the way in which we can use modern teaching, medical data, access to diagnostics, in every walk of life, there are ways of massively enhancing the doctor, the nurse, the teacher, the sports coach, by using technology in a thoughtful way. And technology shouldn't break down. We should be able to run our trains. We should be able to run our...
And how big a crisis is this crisis from schools soon, Lord Bethel, going to switch to the NHS, to hospitals? We've read in the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee talking about a hospital where obese patients can't go above a certain level in the hospital, literally, in case they come tumbling through the ceilings. Shocking.
Yes.
And what's shocking is we don't know the name of the hospital either, so a lot of overweight people are going to be very worried about going up any stairs or getting in a lift. So is this going to spread to hospitals next?
For sure. We have a £10 billion infrastructure deficit in the NHS. I've visited hospitals which were literally Nissan huts from World War II US air bases. There's no way that we should be having that kind of antiquated vintage hospital infrastructure in this day and age. And yes, we have been left behind. I think that the other sad thing in the health is that a lot of people shouldn't be in hospital at all.
No.
They could be treated at home. And on the technology front, I accept your scepticism, and I do know what you mean. Infrastructure.
It ages.
Technology
The built-in
does something.
obsolescence with so much of that stuff.
But one of the reasons why we bring people into hospitals is that's where all the kit is, and that's where we can treat them. Actually, people prefer to be at home, and if we could use virtual wards more thoughtfully...
And there was a report in the FT last week saying we are the slowest to discharge people from our hospitals as well, which is adding to pressure on beds, adding to waiting lists. Why is that a problem?
There is a dislocation between the care facilities and the hospitals, which means that people are very reluctant, authorities are reluctant to take responsibility for patients as they're discharged. And also we've been very slow at adopting new innovation. There are incredible ways of being able to keep an eye on patients when they're at home in order for them to be safe and secure, and we simply haven't invested.
Oh, that sounds horrible. That's not a vision of the future I like. We want to show you this. Can we just show this little video? So this is Gillian Keegan talking about how serious this situation is with crumbling schools, and this is the video that they chose to release.
RAAC stands for reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, and it's a lightweight form of concrete that was used in building construction from the 1950s until the mid-1990s. Problems with the strength and durability of the material mean that some buildings may pose a threat to safety.
Dancing along to that music, is that the most idiotic video a government has put out? A major crisis. Mums and dads worried about kids' schools, where they're going to have to start teaching home, and you've got the Secretary of State talking to the backdrop of some idiot piece of music.
I understand your concern. Can I to put the other side?
Yeah.
I remember during COVID when we put out some very arresting videos, we were then blamed for scaring and putting fear into the population. So try to get that balance between
you didn't need any
your
music.
message across.
Lord Beth, you didn't need any music at all.
The music's terrible. I agree on the music.
So who decides about music for something like that? Who's thought, let's make this cool and give it a funky music bed?
It's some trendy advisor, isn't it? Some
the Youth
youngster.
Department has a government communications team. Many of them are excellent. I don't remember the Education Department being in that category.
If they tried to make...
The irony.
Yeah, when you were a minister, if they tried to make you do that to a backdrop, particularly making such an insignificant announcement, would you have told them to, as my father would say if he was still with us, sling your hook?
Well, the honest truth is that ministers don't get much choice in these matters. You know, Gillian, to do her some credit, is following the advice. I would have been really anxious about the music day.
She probably didn't know about the music. She's probably learned that when she's seen the clip.
They might have dubbed it on afterwards.
Oh, well, yeah, they've obviously edited it and tried to make it look cool. Can you just tell all your MP and Lord friends, don't ever try and look cool. It never works.
I'd learnt that a long time ago.
Lord Bethel's quite cool. Quite cool, Lord Bethel, I think.
Good to see you. Right, still to come, Sir Keir Starmer has begun the process of reshuffling his shadow cabinet today. You're excited about it, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
Big promotion for Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister. What do you think of that? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:25 with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Well, last thing Prime Minister needs is another by-election, but the former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher, appealed against the 8-week suspension from the Commons. He's lost his appeal. There will now be automatically a by-election unless he faces a potential recall ballot in the constituency, which would also lead to a by-election. So that's
and
something
Nadine Dorris's by-election coming up now as well.
Yeah. And today, of course, Keir Starmer is reshuffling the shadow cabinet. I bet you can't wait for the exciting details. Angela Rayner has been appointed Shadow Deputy PM and Levelling Up Secretary. Lisa Nandy has got a job Shadow Cabinet Minister for International Development. That means, effectively, if Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, Angela Rayner will definitely be Deputy Prime Minister.
I wonder if that's a vote winner. Let us know at home. Former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, joins us now. In fact, I will ask you that, James. Do you think Angela Rayner as Deputy Prime Minister would be a vote winner for people out there?
I think Angela Rayner is a pretty talented politician. She's got a lot of personality. She's got decent values and decent politics. So I think so. Although, I mean, these reshuffles, people in Westminster get very excited about them and they think that people in the real world notice, but actually they don't really. What most people will be focused on today is things like the school buildings are falling down rather than which Labour person is going to be speaking about it on the media.
Well, can I just ask your take on this phrase levelling up, which Angela Rayner will be responsible for? I think it's one of the most ridiculous phrases in politics, and that's a tough competition, frankly. What do you make of it? Does it tell people what it means?
Not really. I mean, it's one of these Boris Johnsonisms which we've still been left with. And I imagine that when Labour in government, they might change the department's name. But it's meant to be about regional inequality as well as local government and housing, I think, is the brief. Basically, Michael Gove's one.
Yeah. So we're going to have these by-elections coming up now for Rishi Sunak. How do you think Labour is going to do in those?
Well, I mean, they should do very well. I mean, if you look at the polls, Labour are well ahead. It's clearly a government in complete disarray, can't get a grip on anything. And by-elections are generally a good time to kick the government and kick the incumbent. So, you know, Labour will be feeling pretty confident about them, I think.
What do you think about the U-turns we've had from Keir Starmer? There's going to be no rise in income tax, no wealth tax. The £28 billion Greens budget, that's all been ditched. The 10 pledges he was elected leader on have all effectively been dropped, James. Do you know what he stands for anymore?
No. Well, I mean, everything he's done is sort of consistent with saying to the establishment, don't worry, I won't change things very much. So one has to assume that those are his real values and what he really supports. But obviously, if you say one set of things and then within a very short period of time, you say, no, all of that's completely rubbish and anybody who wants that is wrong, then you can understand why people distrust you.
What does Keir Starmer have to do, do you think, to win over people who think he's a bit boring? I mean, you used to be the advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, regardless of what people thought of him. Everybody had an opinion on him, even if they liked him or didn't like him, whereas Keir Starmer leaves people feeling a bit meh, you know, not quite sure what he represents. I'm not quite sure what he brings to the country. He might just be a better bet than Rishi Sunak.
But I think that actually is Keir Starmer's strategy. It's to not really say or do very much and not have people think that much about him. And then just sort of anything standing next to a Conservative Party in disarray, 13 years of government, living standards falling, school buildings crumbling, our infrastructure falling apart, looks good in comparison. I think that maybe he would feel a bit happier if people didn't tell him he was boring all the time. But from his strategy point of view, which is about becoming prime minister but not carrying through very much social change, it sort of makes sense as a strategy. And I say that as an analysis, not as a supporter of that. I mean, I obviously want social change. I think that we should be taxing the rich and putting money into public services and boosting people's pay and all the things that he stood for a leader on.
Can I ask you one question about Corbyn? Because you were, as Beth pointed out, you did work for him. Reports in the paper this weekend, he was out campaigning very hard. He's very unhappy about the fact child benefit will be... There's going to be new restrictions now on child benefit, another U-turn under a Keir Starmer government. Is he, do you think, finished now, or is he potentially still going to run as an independent in Islington North, where he's been the MP for over 40 years, or even perhaps run as potentially an independent as Mayor of London? Because it looks to me like Sadiq Khan is looking very vulnerable.
I don't think Jeremy will ever retire from being politically active and campaigning on the issues that he always has done with great effect and great consistency over many, many years. I think there are lots of people in Islington North that want him to carry on being their MP, and there's quite a lot of anger that there are efforts to stop him being the MP from Keir Starmer for a kind of political attack against him. So I don't know exactly what he will do, but I think he's totally within his rights to run if he wants to. And he would stand a good chance of winning, I imagine, because he's very popular, and rightly so, in Islington North.
OK, James, always good to see you. James Schneider there, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. I wanted to tell you what you've been saying at home. We've run out of time again.
Yep.
We have too many interesting guests and too many chats. I will get to your messages. I promise you we will get to them.
We're going to go to some headlines.
That's right.
Andrew and Bev, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Angela Rayner has been appointed Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary. She replaces Lisa Nandy, who's become Shadow Cabinet Minister for International Development. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer's reshuffling his cabinet. Meanwhile, Labour's promising not to raise income tax if it wins the next election. Sir Keir says he'd avoid tax hikes across the board as he pledged to avoid increasing the burden on working people. The Prime Minister says it's completely and utterly wrong to suggest that he is to blame for failing to fully fund a programme to rebuild England's schools when he was Chancellor. It comes as ministers are under pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from crumbling concrete as children return to school. Over 100 schools have already had to close or partially close. Mr Sunak says the government has addressed the issue at the right time.
Of course, I know the timing is frustrating, but I want to give people a sense of the scale of what we're grappling with here. There are around 22,000 schools in England, and the important thing to know is we expect that 95% of those schools won't be impacted by this. Around 50 schools have already been mitigated. Another 100 are in the process of being so. And our expectation is in a matter of weeks, the bulk of the remaining schools that will have this issue will be identified as well.
An independent review says former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson should apologise to MPs for bullying the former Chief Whip. He sent offensive text messages to Wendy Morton after he wasn't invited to the late Queen's funeral. The panel says Sir Gavin should also take part in appropriate behaviour training. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2636 and 1.1700 euros. The price of gold is £1,537 and 77 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,504 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
A little bit of American politics next, still to come. A new poll has shown that Trump and Biden are neck and neck for president in 2024. We'll have more on that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. There's something of a summery feel about the weather at the moment with plenty of sunshine, and it's going to feel hot for some, although there will be a little bit of rain across the far north of Scotland because of this front here. However, much of the UK is under the influence of high pressure, and that's why it's so settled at the moment, and that's why there is so much sunshine around. Looking at the details, and as we go through this afternoon, plenty of blue sky, not a huge amount of cloud around for most of us, although in the far north where we have that drizzly rain, there will be a bit of cloud here. Because of the sunshine, temperatures are rising. We're likely to get into the low 30s towards the south, so feeling pretty hot in the sunshine here, a little bit cooler, a bit more fresher as we head further north. As we go through the evening and overnight, we are actually going to see the wind strengthening a little bit across parts of southwest England and into Wales. Could see gusts of around 40, perhaps even 50 miles per hour for a time. As a result, I'm not expecting a repeat of the mist and fog that we saw through this morning here. However, further north and east, we could see some mist and fog developing through the night. Temperatures not dropping much, so quite a warm, difficult night for sleeping for some of us. As we look through Tuesday then, any mist and fog across northern and eastern parts will quickly clear away, and then it's somewhat of a repeat of today pretty much. Plenty of sunny skies, lots of blue skies across the bulk of the UK, just a little bit of cloud bubbling up at times, but notice still staying a bit cloudier towards the far north, and temperatures even higher could get to highs around 31 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:39. We're all nattering in the studio. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
Prime Minister's been speaking about the schools crisis and other matters on the day. Parliament turns to it. This is what he had to say. Well, he's not speaking, so let's move on. We've got Sarah Vine, columnist at the Daily Mail.
Sorry about that. Was our drop the dead donkey moment for the morning. I'm so sorry about that.
And it looked to me like we'd heard it before anyway. And Emma Wolf was with us too. Let's talk about people working from the beach.
Yes, this is the splash, the Daily Mail splash today, which is very brilliant. About apparently a load of council workers have been allowed to work not just from home, but from basically wherever.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Italy, France,
Australia.
Australia.
Doesn't matter about the time difference,
doesn't
Sarah.
matter, no, apparently it's fine. Which probably explains why, you know, the rubbish nothing gets done. There are weeds everywhere. There are lime bikes littered across all the flagstones in my local borough are completely higgledy-piggledy. Yeah, but also we could tie it in with another story in the Times today about millions of HMRC calls going unanswered because 1 in 5 of the civil servants who work for His Majesty's Revenue Customs, I should say, are working from home.
It's outrageous.
Oh, no. HMRC, only 1 in 5 attended the office once.
Okay, it's the other way around.
Once in July.
No.
1 in 5 of them went into the office in July. Okay. And I know it's the holidays, but that is appalling. It's not even like they're doing 3 days in the office and then having long weekends.
People are doing their VAT returns.
Not even going
people are doing VAT returns all year round, tax returns all year round.
10 million HMRC calls not answered, and yet we're meant to file our tax returns and do all this responsible
How many calls not answered?
10 million HMRC calls.
But does that mean then if you don't pay your tax bill, you can say, well, I tried, but no one picked up the phone?
I rang and no one picked up.
It means you have to go to your government portal, your
and
you have to do it like that. And if
what is a government portal?
It's a government gateway. You have to go and do a government gateway, which is it's very complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah, and you need to have
your gateway ID, and then they'll text you the code.
And if you forget it, that's it.
Yeah,
they won't tell you again. Anyway, so basically, what they've done is they've just put it all on the person, or all on you now. So I don't know.
And of course, if you're a day late with your tax bill, they start charging you interest.
7%.
Yeah,
actually.
Is it really?
7%.
Yeah.
Yes. So
are you speaking from experience? Were you late with your tax bill? Have you a confession you'd like to make on live television? You're very welcome.
No, I just happened to know this because I was looking into it for reasons I can't really explain. But I mean, my accountant tells me it's 7%.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And they know how to reach us. They all have our email addresses and our mobile numbers, and we just have to ring. I've been ringing Hackney Council to explain to them about a council tax issue for about 2 years. I've given up. I mean, you cannot get through.
And I'm Camden, and the automated system, when you're trying to pay a bill, cuts off after about 30 seconds. Exactly. Brilliant.
All I do now, my approach to this, is if I have any direct debits or payments going out to any organisation I can't get hold of, I just stop paying them. Because eventually they'll come and find you. And then I say, I've been waiting for your call. Yes, there's a reason why I haven't paid my broadband bill or my gas bill or whatever it is.
Maybe I should try that.
But I mean, there is a serious point here.
There is,
which is this is why nothing works. I mean, you ask why nothing works. This is why nothing works. Because nobody's actually doing their job.
But even nothing works, even in our sort of towns and in our... There's no public lavatories. There's no clocks that work in our town centres. No one cares about. And like you say, the lime bikes littered all over the streets.
And bins not being emptied.
Bins not being emptied.
Horrible.
This matters. But you were asking why is everyone attacking everyone in Tesco? Yeah. Well, maybe it's to do with the breakdown of kind of...
Broken Britain.
But in the borough where Bevan Island, the council spent £50,000 doing rainbow crossings.
Oh, that's nice.
The flagstones flagstones are also uneven. You can't... I mean, wheelchair users can't actually move
Pram
around.
users, yeah,
Pram
old
users,
people.
because it's all, you know, because they don't maintain...
Rainbow crossings
about
to...
£50,000 on a rainbow
for the
LGBTQ...
for me?
Yeah, for you.
Oh, well, maybe
so when you come...
I could have unveiled it. I could have unveiled it. I could have cut a pink flag or a pink ribbon.
Yeah, exactly.
How
So
ridiculous
that you
is
can
that?
feel that you are appreciated
What
and
a
loved.
waste of money. Because most cars don't stop at them anyway.
But don't worry if you're blind and you trip over a flagstone, or if you're old, or if you're trying to push a buggy, or, as you say, a wheelchair.
Yeah.
That
past the line bikes.
Do you think the country is broken?
I do. I really, really do. And I think that feeds into this thing about just knocking someone over the head and running off with a six-pack of beer or whatever.
Yeah. But I know people
not
go...
just young
people say I
people.
bang on about this too much, but I do tie a lot of this back to what happened during the lockdown period. And there was a massive mental shift in people. And I think particularly in the supermarkets that we were talking about earlier, suddenly somebody behind a supermarket counter, a 12-year-old who wouldn't normally have any power, could say, you stand on that spot, why haven't you got your mask on? And they suddenly became... The customer was no longer right. You'd have a you know, like say, a child saying, you can't come in my shop if you... And we haven't kind of retained levelled out that power dynamic somehow in these public settings. There's so much conflict.
There is so much conflict.
I wrote a piece in the Mail last week saying that, you know, Britain was in a real state, and I have never had so many emails from people just agreeing.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I don't know what to say. Everyone's just frustrated and upset that nothing works anymore. You know,
Takes ages to
air
get a driving
traffic control
licence.
system doesn't work anymore. It takes ages to get, and it just feels like the root cause of it is that people who are supposed to be doing certain jobs just don't seem to be taking them seriously.
There has been work done by all sorts of think tanks showing, without a doubt, efficiency is reduced if people work from home.
Of course it
and
is.
substantially reduced. There's no doubt about it. How can you do your job as a civil servant if you're working in Australia with a time difference of 11 hours?
Yeah.
How does that work?
But where's the leadership? Where are the bosses? Where are the managers making sure
why
these
is the
jobs are being
Chancellor,
done?
who was on TV yesterday saying there's no extra money for crumbling schools, not saying to his civil servants, get off your butt and get into the building?
Yeah. Well,
Make them.
is it any better in America, Emma? Trump and Biden are now locked, apparently, in a dead heat for... If there was an election tomorrow, it would be a dead heat.
So this is really interesting. This is a Wall Street Journal poll, and both men, Biden and Trump, got 46% of the vote.
Of course, the Wall Street Journal hates both of them.
Yeah, which is kind of worrying on both counts. Firstly, you've got Trump facing 91 trumped-up charges, I would say, but 91 charges. And he gets as many votes, as much support, as the serving president.
I'm surprised that Biden got that much support.
I am, actually, 46%.
Yeah.
But the other interesting bit is when you ask for Republican leadership, Trump's way out in front. Way out in front, ahead of Ramaswamy.
And what's his name? Your mate DeSantis, his vote has halved.
Yeah.
He has finished DeSantis.
So, he
feels like
is.
it. What's happened to him?
Ramaswamy came fourth.
Did he? Well, he's
but Trump is
rising up.
way up on 59% of the vote.
I don't think that it's not. I don't think it's anything. I don't think Ron DeSantis has done anything particularly wrong to lose support. I think that people who like Ron DeSantis are just supporting Trump because they feel the injustice of what they think is happening to him. Sarah.
Well, Trump has become a sort of martyr to the right-wing nutters in America.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it just seems like Groundhog Day. I mean, America is basically two countries.
Yeah.
And whatever you do, whoever you put forward, you just get this sort of kind of pretty even split between them.
But Sarah, isn't it terrible?
And it's the part of the polarisation of politics. There's no sort of middle ground anymore, isn't it? You're
But I think people are angry and fed up. I think really people are going for Trump because they feel all this stuff that we're talking about. What's the alternative?
But the idea that it's going to be the same choice as last time in a country with a population of 330 million.
Yeah, and supposedly the most powerful nation in the world.
Yeah, it's going to be a choice between 82-year-old Joe Biden, dopey
Who
Joe,
is just simply not
there half the time.
Joe bedridden.
Yeah, quite. And it means we're going to have Kamala Harris is going to be effectively the president because she will just effectively have to take over.
And she is very hard left.
Yeah,
which
and
is
useless.
Why people, don't like.
Yeah, and he won't dump her as his running mate because he can't dump a black woman. Why? If she's no good, dump her.
But then you've got to look at Robert Kennedy Jr., who I think is outstanding, and also what Robert Kennedy Jr.'s message, which is all about liberation and freedom. He's very much playing on that ticket, individual choice, get the nation fit, get the nation educated. A lot of what he is saying would very much traditionally have been a Republican position, Emma, and yet he is a Democrat who is appealing to the right. There was a rumour that he might defect and stand with Trump. That is the dream ticket.
That's a dream ticket. That really, really is. I'd vote for that.
I would vote for that.
I don't think that you can rule Trump out.
No, I don't.
Do you think he's going to be the next president of the United States?
I think he could do it again. I really, really do.
And the more these charges seem to come in, Sarah, the more it bolsters his support.
Because his followers just either see them as more sort of notches on his bedpost against the sort of crazy lefties. So he just builds his supporter base, and they get stronger and stronger. And as you say, if we can bring in a candidate who's a bit more middle ground, that'll bring a lot more
he's knocking on a bit, but he's a lot younger for his age than Biden.
Yeah, he's fairly robust.
Yeah.
Biden is not right in the head, is he? I mean, we've seen it on time.
He's certainly not running the country, which sort of begs the question who is. Mental health is a higher priority than climate for the under-40s, Emma. What's that story about?
Yeah, this is interesting. The under-40s think, well, most people, I think a think tank has found that most people think NHS mental health services are failing. That they can't get access when they need it, that they can't get help when they need it, and that you need to reach crisis point until you can actually get help. But the under-40s, there's such snowflakey woke people, but anyway, the under-40s are saying that it's more, that the mental health is more important than crime, climate change, or Ukraine.
Really? More important than Ukraine?
No, there are people out there dying. This kind of makes me, it's just kind of...
Is Prince Harry in this survey?
I'm sure he was...
He's under 40, the king of wokery.
His mental health is more important than crime, climate change,
more
and
than
Ukraine.
anybody's. And, of course, nobody gave him any help, of course, did they?
Well, it's just very solipsistic, isn't it? They're just self-obsessed.
Yeah.
Self-obsessed sort of
but you've got teenage children. Do they talk all the time about mental health?
No, they don't. No, not at all. In fact, they're the opposite. But I mean, that it's cyclical, this stuff, isn't it? I mean, the under-40s. My children are Gen Z, so they're very unwoke, and they're not interested in that kind of thing. They're sort of they've had too much of it.
Yeah.
They've had too many teachers asking them about their mental health.
Yeah.
They've had too much stuff on the internet about it. So they're kind of they're sort of like, well, actually, I'm fine. I don't really want to.
If I shout at my toddler, he says, "You can be nice. You can be nice." Who are you telling?
Well, where did he get that from?
I don't know where he's got it from. You can be nice, Mummy.
I mean, it's always a choice. Well, my 14-year-old came home from came home from school and said, "Can they stop telling me I should have a mental health issue?"
Yeah, exactly.
On one of the mental health. She's like, "I'm fine. I'm starting to feel unusual if I don't confess to having a mental health issue."
Good on him.
Gets it.
Good on the teenagers fighting back.
They're rebelling against it.
That's
what
good.
They're doing.
That's terrific. Yeah, of course.
I don't know if we have... Pip Thompson will be in a minute to tell us what's coming up on the show. Let's just finish. Can we finish on the fabulous story that we're going to have warm weather? Let's end on a high note.
But we're back at...
It's going to last until Halloween.
And we're back at work.
I hate it.
No, Sarah.
I know that. I grew up in Italy, where it's too hot all the time, and I deliberately came back to live in Britain, where it's nice and cool and rains most of the time, which is what I like.
And it's great for the
there's
garden.
good cloud cover, which is good for the complexion.
Yeah.
Now, it's just hot all the time. It's just very annoying.
We've had one day. We've had one day of heat. Let us have a little bit more sunshine.
I was in my shorts all weekend. It was so lovely.
Yeah, well, there you go. So there's a positive. You get to see Andrew Pearce in his shorts.
Which are not great. They're not great, the legs. They're not that bad, actually.
I just think this is what we need.
This is
Nothing's working.
The country is so depressed.
Yeah.
We need some sunshine.
No, because then there'll be a hosepipe ban. No, there'll be a hosepipe ban.
I don't care about the hosepipe ban.
I cannot wait for
you
the weather
can flout it. You can go out late at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to go. We're going to reach 33 degrees.
Factor 50.
Yes, of course.
Factor 50.
It's wonderful.
Britain is not equipped for the heat.
No, we're not.
There's no air conditioning. The
And I use the tube a lot.
Yeah,
and let me tell you, it's terrible.
Get on your bike. Get on your bike. Cycle around. It is gorgeous out there.
Right. Do you wear a helmet,
Find an outdoor
Emma?
pool.
No, I don't.
Why don't you wear a helmet?
Because I don't fall off.
You might be knocked off.
I don't want to lecture about helmets right now. I've been told how to live my life for the last 2 years. Don't you start telling me I can't do this and I need to put on a mask or a helmet.
Yeah. But do you wear factor 50?
No, I don't, actually.
Do you wear no factor?
I do. No, I do. I wear like 10, 20, whatever, but 50 is like a block. It's like
I just shut the windows and stay inside.
In the dark.
Stay out of the
Miss Havisham.
sun. Yes.
No, we have
Locked
to
away.
make the most
Locked
of it.
in the attic.
And it's not going to be that. It's not going to be, it's going to be 33 degrees, maybe a little bit more. That's manageable. We've got to celebrate.
It's over 100, isn't it? 33.
That's okay.
It's too hot.
That's over 100, isn't it?
12
33?
degrees is about right for me.
It's sort of high 90s, isn't it? 33 degrees?
I think it's more. I can't work it out, actually. Forgive me, I don't know how to work it out.
No, I can't work out.
Isn't it terrible? But I can't do kilometres and miles either. Not very with it.
Well,
Yes.
you don't have pounds, shillings and pence.
Yeah,
That was
bring them.
complicated.
Yes.
Sarah Vine, thank you so much.
Always
That is
a
it for
joy.
Britain's Newsroom today. Up next, it is the live desk with Mark Longcrest and Pip Thompson. Pip, what is coming up on today's programme?
Good afternoon. I burnt my legs in Cornwall at the weekend, so we won't be seeing those on GB News this afternoon. It's absolutely glorious out there. We are, of course, talking about the weather, but more importantly, the Prime Minister. He says it's completely and utterly wrong to blame him for the school concrete crisis. This is despite a former top civil servant saying that the Prime Minister slashed the school's repair budget when he was Chancellor. And we're also talking about drivers being hit by the largest monthly fuel price hike in some 20 years. Are prices going to continue to rise? All that very shortly. Now that weather forecast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. There's something of a summery feel about the weather at the moment with plenty of sunshine, and it's going to feel hot for some, although there will be a little bit of rain across the far north of Scotland because of this front here. However, much of the UK is under the influence of high pressure, and that's why it's so settled at the moment, and that's why there is so much sunshine around. Looking at the details, and as we go through this afternoon, plenty of blue sky, not a huge amount of cloud around for most of us, although in the far north where